Video games are a funny thing, and sometimes they make it really difficult for me to do what it is I want to do. I am Zosnerol, random internet content creator. And my job is supposed to be to tell you, hey, avoid this game. Hey, play that game. But what is a good video game? This is actually a very difficult question when you really stop to think about it. How does somebody reasonably recommend anything and go, yeah, you should spend money on that thing, when the actual experience is purely subjective? It's just you and the stuff happening on the screen, and your eyes and your brain and those buttons in your hand. How does somebody say, I like this, therefore you will? That's the problem I'm having as I try to recommend Death Stranding. Death Stranding is one of my favorite games. Death Stranding is one of the most unique things I've ever played. Death Stranding is an absolute nightmare to try to talk about. This isn't the kind of game that I could just tell somebody, get it now, you're gonna love it. In reality, the core gameplay loop and its underlying mechanics have to be felt with that controller in your hand as you manipulate your character through the screen for you to actually understand what it is it's trying to do. I remember when this game first came out and the early reviews came in, and it was a fairly polarizing thing. Some people were calling it a masterpiece, other people were calling it slow, boring trash, a literal delivery man simulator. And the truth is, those reviews are all correct. The good ones, the bad ones. At some points, this game is an utter masterpiece. At other points, it is slow and boring. And it is a delivery man simulator. That is what you're supposed to be doing. That is the core gameplay loop. You essentially strap a bunch of boxes onto your body and just go, using the left and right triggers to keep yourself balanced. It's all very simple, but perfectly implemented and very effective. You have to make sure that your boxes aren't stacked up too high because you will tilt over far more easily. And you also have to make sure that that load isn't too heavy because you will drain your stamina far more quickly and you will tilt over far more easily, making the end of your journey much more difficult. On top of that, there's this ridiculous and exaggerated, almost cartoonish momentum mechanic in which something like tripping over a rock will cause you to stumble uncontrollably, or going up a steep incline will cause you to tilt over dramatically. And it's all beautifully integrated into the game world itself, fully keeping your focus on every little obstacle in front of you. And that's what this game does best, and better than 99% of all other open worlds out there. It actually manages to make traversing from point A to point B something that is engaging and interesting. It's just you and your destination and how you're going to make it there with your packages intact. How are you going to navigate your way around this mountain or over this river or around these rocks? And these rocks, oh, the rocks, they are your real enemy in this game. They are the true adversary. And yeah, there's these guys, and they've got guns, and they're trying to steal your stuff or maybe kill you. And there's these areas where it starts to rain, and there's these blob ghosty monster things that show up, and they can really ruin everything. They'll drag you away and knock over all your stuff and ruin your delivery. But they are only obstacles, really. The blob monsters show up with the rain, and the blob monsters aren't the enemy. The rain is. That rain will ruin your packages so very quickly and ruin your entire delivery, and they're always perfectly placed in front of you to be another obstacle for you to traverse. This isn't about combat. This is about avoiding combat for the most part. And when you're just there, moving from point A to point B, everything is perfect. Until it isn't. You just want to make it to your next destination, open up your next waypoint, but you're constantly interrupted by a dumb little boss monster fight, or a redundant cutscene, or an explanation of something you already understand because it's been told to you 50 other times. Something that just slows everything down and gets in the way of the core gameplay loop. Typical Hideo Kojima nonsense. Well written characters with really dumb names that keep on repeating themselves over and over and over again. Or getting dragged into World War One to engage in a gunfight. Gunfights that pull you completely away from your fun and force you to use clunky weapons that kind of make sense within the scope of the story, but in reality, they don't. In the story, killing people turns them into bombs because Kojima, but you're given rocket launchers. Why? So you could fight a giant whale monster in the sky. Why? I don't know. None of this fits into the traversal. None of this complements the actual core gameplay loop. They do make sense, I guess, within the story, but the story itself gets in the way of the core gameplay loop a lot of the times and pulls you away from the fun, which is delivering the packages. And it's not like the story doesn't offer good delivery missions that complement what you're doing within the gameplay and enhance the story overall. But those are few and far between, and the majority of the time you're just being interrupted by nonsense. And it's unfortunate, because being in this world is so much fun. And as you open up the world, it comes to life in a way that I have never seen in any other game. There aren't any little deer or bunnies hopping around. There isn't any of that typical open world fauna that you see. The game is mostly barren and devoid of life. Just you and those rocks. But as you progress through the game, you get to build different structures that help navigate your way around a little more easily. And as you open up the different delivery points and reconnect everything, you start to see other people's structures, other players just like you, that build their own little bridges or their own little watchtowers, or help to rebuild a road to make a delivery a little more easy. And that makes the world come to life in a way that I have never seen before in any other game. My stuff, the things I built to help my playthrough, are somewhere out there doing the same in some other player's game world. And their stuff is in my world. And we're all helping each other out. And even though we never actually meet or directly interact in any way, this all makes the world itself feel more lived in than any other open world I've ever been in. Most other open world games, I'm just holding forward, occasionally jumping, and maybe they'll put some enemies in front of me to keep me amused. Or worse yet, I'm staring at a GPS in the bottom corner of the screen. This game doesn't have a GPS, and it wasn't until my fourth playthrough that I even noticed. I was too busy making myself familiar with the environment, and eventually you instinctively just know where to go. And the open world itself is incredibly well designed. You could look up at that skybox and know exactly where you're supposed to go. Or perhaps you're navigating some steep rocky incline, and if you look hard enough, you'll find this perfect little spot that you're able to squeeze through. And those rocks, oh, those rocks are always laid out in front of you to constantly hold your attention. Navigating my way around those rocks is easily my favorite part of this game. Except when you're driving some of the vehicles. They control terribly. And there are those roads that you could build by pooling resources with other players. But anytime you try to take those vehicles off-road, all those rocks that I love so much become the most annoying things on the planet. You've got big old giant trucks slamming into tiny little rocks as if they're brick walls. And it doesn't make sense why they control this badly, but they do. And it's another one of those little annoyances that gets in the way of that core gameplay loop, because they could be a great part of delivering packages, but they just aren't. Despite all this, I couldn't help but love the game. and found myself regularly excusing away all of these bad things. Of course, these rocks are going to get in the way. These are not off road vehicles. Of course, the guns control poorly. This man is a delivery man. Of course, these World War whatever sequences are a nightmare. They're literally called nightmares. But it really doesn't excuse them away. These things shouldn't be there. And they make this game harder to recommend than it should be. The vehicles didn't have to perform so poorly. The guns didn't have to be so boring and clunky and unimaginative. There's really only two non-lethal guns that really fit the lore well and I found fun to use. And one of them is from the director's cut only. It's not even in the original game. And the story, honestly, is pretty good. I liked it. It was just way too long for its own good. And even though it was well acted, the characters themselves were pretty stupid and had bad names like Die Hard Man, and kept on interrupting me with cutscenes that I just had to tolerate. And while all these things kept getting in the way of me just trying to deliver some packages, the overall game was utterly fascinating and well worth my time. Now, will it be worth your time? That's impossible to determine. I don't want you to go out and spend some money on something you might really dislike, but the gameplay mechanics themselves and the overall traversal is unique enough to where I feel everybody needs to try it. Maybe borrow it from a friend, maybe find it on sale. I don't know what camp you'll end up in. Maybe you'll think it's a masterpiece, maybe you'll think it's trash. I honestly have no idea. I know I certainly enjoyed it, and I had a really good time playing through the director's cut this time around. It doesn't really add much to the overall core experience, just a bunch of goofy little extra stuff that, if I'm being honest, kind of makes the whole experience a little sillier, but I liked it. You'd be just fine with the original. And I know I'm definitely going to play through it again one of these days. Just this time, I'm probably going to skip those cutscenes. Die Hard, man. Die Hard, man. What is that? So stupid. You've got to be kidding me.